Picture this. You've got a 14-foot strip of ancient linen that has completely baffled some of the greatest scientific minds on the planet. It's called the Shroud of Turin, and on it is this faint, sepia-toned image of a crucified man. Now, we are not here today for a theological debate. Not at all. What we are doing is diving into the ultimate high-tech forensic cold case. We're going to look at exactly what happens when modern science, armed with literally the most advanced analytical tools we have, collides with an artifact that just flat-out refuses to be explained. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this absolutely bizarre moment from 1976. You had these two physicists, John Jackson and Eric Jumper, and they decided to run a photograph of the shroud through an incredibly specialized piece of equipment. It was this NASA-adjacent experiment that honestly should not have worked. They basically wanted to see what would happen if you fed a flat, two-dimensional picture of this ancient cloth into a machine that was built for analyzing outer space.
So this machine was called a VP8 image analyzer. Back in the 1970s, scientists were using this thing to build 3D topographical maps of the Moon and Mars from flat satellite data. It worked by converting light and dark values into physical height values. Now, if you take an ordinary photograph or a normal painting and feed it into this machine, you just get a distorted, meaningless mess of random hills and valleys. And that makes sense, right? Because normal 2D images don't contain actual depth information. They aren't like a modern iPhone depth map. But when Jackson and Jumper fed the shroud image in, they didn't get a distorted mess.
No, they got this, a dimensionally accurate 3D human face. The nose rose correctly above the cheekbones, the eye sockets receded with perfect anatomical depth. I mean, this is a mind-bending, straight-out-of-sci-fi anomaly. The shroud literally contains encoded spatial data. No painting in human history has ever done this. No photograph, no rubbing, absolutely no medieval artwork has ever been found to contain this kind of hidden, three-dimensional geometry.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between what a medieval forger would logically do and what this cloth actually shows us. Think about 14th century art for a second. A medieval painter always depicted crucifixion with nails driven right through the palms of the hands. That was the absolute standard artistic tradition at the time. But the shroud, it ignores that tradition entirely, and instead it gives us grim forensic reality.
Because modern anatomists know that nailing a person through the palms is physically incorrect. The soft tissue would just tear right through under the weight of a human body. But Roman executioners, who crucified thousands of people, they knew this. They actually drove the nails through the wrists, specifically through this natural gap between the carpal bones called the space of Destat. And sure enough, the shroud shows the entry wounds precisely at the wrists.
But it gets even crazier. If you look really closely at the image, you'll notice the thumbs are completely missing. They're folded tightly beneath the palms. Now, why would that be? Well, it turns out that a nail driven through the space of Destat at the correct angle strikes the median nerve. And when that happens, it triggers an involuntary neurological reflex that violently draws the thumbs into the palms. There is no way a medieval artist could have possibly known about that kind of highly specific neurological detail.
Then we have the blood. Extensive chemical analysis has confirmed for sure this isn't paint. It is real human hemoglobin. But here is the unexpected, really fascinating detail. The blood contains incredibly high levels of a compound called bilirubin. Now, bilirubin is produced when red blood cells break down under extreme physical stress and trauma. Its massive concentration is actually what has kept the bloodstains on the cloth a reddish-brown hue over centuries, instead of just turning black like normal dried blood does. This chemically proves that the body wrapped in this cloth underwent severe, agonizing trauma.
So the crucial point is right here. This is where the whole forgery theory completely falls apart chronologically. Microscopic analysis reveals that wherever there is blood on the cloth, there is absolutely no image underneath it. The forensic sequence is totally unarguable. First, a bleeding body was placed in the cloth. Second, the blood soaked in. Third, somehow an image formed around those bloodstains. You simply can't paint an image and then neatly dab blood perfectly over the blank spots later.
So what exactly is the image made of? Back in 1978, the STIRP team, which was this group of over 30 rigorous scientists, they examined the cloth under high-powered microscopes, and they found absolutely no paint, no pigment, no brush strokes, no capillary spreading of any kind of liquid. The image is actually caused by this microscopic, selective aging and oxidation of the very outermost surface of the linen fibers. And you want to know the thickness of this discoloration? Just 200 nanometers. That is literally thinner than a single cell wall.
And the deeper scientists looked, the stranger the evidence became. The cloth's documented historical record actually begins in France in 1355. But a Swiss forensic criminologist named Max Frey-Sulzer started pulling microscopic evidence off the cloth using sticky tape, and he uncovered a geographic impossibility.
Trapped deep inside those fibers was invisible, microscopic evidence physically anchoring the cloth to the Middle East. He found 58 distinct pollen species that included Gundelia tourneforti, which is a Middle Eastern thorn plant, and Zygophyllum dumosum, a plant that is endemic only to Israel and Jordan. And even more astonishing than that, geologists found travertine limestone dust on the foot region of the cloth, and it chemically matches the unique limestone signature found specifically at the Damascus Gate in ancient Jerusalem.
I mean, it is almost laughable to imagine a 14th century French forger pulling this off. Just think about it. To fake this, our medieval artist would have needed to casually invent the science of microscopic paleontology, which, by the way, wasn't even used until the 20th century, then travel to Palestine, collect specific local pollens and highly specific Jerusalem limestone dust, and then invisibly embed all of it into the cloth without leaving a single trace. It's just absurd.
But then, in 1988, it really seemed like the mystery was over. Samples were cut from the edge of the cloth and given to 3 independent labs for radiocarbon dating. In October of that year, the headlines exploded around the world. Mystery solved. It's a fake. The tests dated the cloth to somewhere between 1260 and 1390 CE. The whole world moved on. Case closed, right? Well, actually, no. In 2005, a brilliant plot twist reopened the entire cold case.
So an esteemed chemist named Ray Rogers, who had actually initially accepted those 1988 results, decided to investigate just a little bit further. He started looking into a chemical compound called vanillin. It's found in plant cell walls, and it naturally disappears as linen ages over centuries. Here's the rule. Medieval linen still has vanillin in it. Truly ancient linen does not.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens when we look at the data side by side. Rogers tested the main body of the shroud and found 0 vanillin, which dates it to between 1,300 and 3,000 years old. But when he tested the exact corner where that 1988 sample was taken, vanillin was present. The 1988 scientists hadn't tested the original ancient cloth at all. Without realizing it, they had tested a highly skilled, mixed linen and cotton medieval repair patch that was woven in after a fire in 1532. The carbon dating was completely compromised.
So, the 1988 test is out. The forensics absolutely confirm a real tortured body. The pollen confirms Jerusalem. But we are still left with the biggest, most terrifyingly complex question of the whole thing. If it isn't paint and it isn't a fake, how on earth was the image actually made? And that question led a team of Italian researchers at INEA into years of high-level physics experiments. They laid out the crazy physical constraints required to make this image. It has to encode 3D data, it has to act strictly at the 200 nanometer fiber level, and crucially, it cannot have contact distortion, meaning if you take a cloth and wrap it around a three-dimensional face, the resulting 2D image will look stretched out and wide. But the shroud face isn't stretched, it looks like a straight-on projection. Whatever made this image had to happen simultaneously across the entire body in a fraction of a second. And the NAS scientists, they found only one process that could replicate the microscopic chemistry of those shroud fibers: a rapid burst of vacuum ultraviolet radiation. But to scale that up, to create a full-body image perfectly uniform in a fraction of a second, it would require exactly this: 34 trillion watts of power. 34 trillion watts. That is a number that almost defies human comprehension. It exceeds the total electrical generating capacity of the entire Earth. It is orders of magnitude beyond the most powerful laser systems in existence today. Creating this image is, quite literally, beyond human capability right now. When the INEA research team finally published their findings, they did so with careful scientific restraint, stating the image is consistent with the burst of electromagnetic radiation that lies outside the capabilities of present-day technology. Just let that sink in for a moment. These are top-tier physicists making a hard physical observation. It's not magic, it's not a theological claim, it is a measurable physical constraint that completely shatters our modern technological limits. We have essentially reached the boundary of human knowledge. We have a cloth that holds the real blood of a crucified man, maps the streets of ancient Jerusalem, and bears an image forged by a burst of energy we can't even replicate today. So I leave you with this.
If science has painstakingly mapped the absolute boundary of what it cannot explain, what exactly are we looking at? Drop your theories, your thoughts, and your questions below. Keep your curiosity sharp and never stop looking at the evidence.